everyone. This is update for September 24, day 213 of the war and of the date update. So this is that video, actually two of them. One is about, it's called Battalion Monaco, about Ukrainian beneficiaries of Ukraine's economic system, how they spend time in Monaco actually, and not technically they are not allowed to leave Ukraine, most of them. So it just it's nicely made video. I don't support the media outlet that made it. In my opinion, it has very agendas that are not helpful for Ukrainian future. However, it was very well made video. I highly recommend. Unfortunately, I don't think there is English version of it, but you can see everything basically from the picture. So as they say, enjoy watching. So that was first topic. Then actually I got email from one of the viewers discussing this Iranian UAVs and sort of like more details about it. So I just wanna I mentioned there was more advanced drone that allegedly shot down, or maybe sort of like it lost control and was grounded by Ukrainian side. It's called Mohajer 6. So this is it has payload of 100 kilograms. Its weight about 600 kilograms, 600 or maybe 650. As you can see, altitude 5.5 kilometers. Speed 200, distance 200. So it's not terribly sort of anything advanced from a big picture perspective. It's just kind of very cheap disposable UAV. The danger of this thing is actually, as you can see, there's attached rocket there. I think it's called in Iranian version Almas, and I don't have full kind of information, but basically it's copy, well, probably poor copy. To which kind of level of copy it is, I don't know either, of Israeli spike rocket, essentially, which is a pretty advanced rocket and pretty dangerous because it can attack basically tanks or any targets from the top. So sort of similar or something to Javelin. So as you can see, this is somewhat, I would say, more simplified version of Bayraktar, actually much worse version of Bayraktar, but at the same time it's also much cheaper. So remains to be seen. Russia continues applying those, and Shahid 136, which is Gerain 2, and this is in Russian it's called Gerain 1. So those are probably two major ones. We haven't seen Gerain 3. So probably the only two that Russia decided to buy from Iran are those two. So that's, oh, and then one more thing about these drones or UAVs, probably better way to say it is they apparently, this is from Russian sources, they were all basically reverse engineered by Iran based on the shutdown or whatever they could find those UAV. I don't, I'm not expert on that part of the world, but basically they copied whatever they can find from the US UAVs that they would shoot down or something like that, and the same goes true for Israel. But obviously there is a lack of many kinds of equipment, specifically electronics and so on. So they're not as advanced, not even close, but call it poor copies. At the same time, they're very cheap. So they probably can, in right hands, they can do enough damage. Let's put it this way. In the weak hands, they obviously will not do much damage. So really, but it's all pretty much true with any weapon, essentially. So that's kind of update on, kind of like refresh on what's going on this UAV wise, and they've been attacking Ukrainian forces today as well. So then I just want to move to another topic, and that's this referendums. So just I mentioned it some time ago. So referendums are going on in all 4 regions. So the occupied regions that by Russia: Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhya, and Kherson. So, and what's what the future basically? What's the purpose of all of this? The goal is obviously to paint, 80 or 90% support in a couple of days. I think they finish in a day or two. Don't remember, but the key point doesn't even matter if it's a day or two. But the point is that on end of September there will be a legislative session of the Russian Parliament where they basically, let's say, accept these regions into Russia essentially, and Russian president immediately will sign that law, and that's it. And at that point, from the Russian perspective, obviously, these regions are part of Russia, and the sort of next logical step out of this, if Ukraine continues sort of fight there, attacks there, whatever targets, this is considered Russian territory. So there is very high chance that early October, Russian leadership may use that as excuse to declare formal war, or basically further tighten the screws in the country. Because actually right now people or sort of males, those males can still freely leave Russia. The only exception, they already have a list of people who they sort of want to stay. So those cannot leave. So basically, if you go to airport and you want to leave, or to the border by car, they already know if you're allowed to leave or not. And if you're already on the list, you will not be able to leave. But for those who are not, they can leave. So there is still decent outflow of people from Russia. But basically, it does look like it's going to very high chance, let's put this way, of formal declaration of the war, probably sometime early October. Not guaranteed though, but it looks like, based on what sort of everything, rhetoric, what we're seeing, it does look like it's going in that direction at that point. Actually, I should have discussed this actually when this whole thing was announced, and I totally just was too busy, forgot, and didn't feel well. So let's discuss actually mobilization potential of both countries. So Russian mobilization potential is about 14 million. That's what they can mobilize, and actually, realistically speaking, it's somewhat less. It's probably more closer to 10, but because once you start getting to that 14 number, you're pulling so many males out of the economy that the economy will literally start fall apart, literally, pretty much immediately. So you probably, so at most they can pull about 10. Technically, yes, you can pull 14. Nobody ever pulled more than that number, and for the good reasons, because simple economy stops functioning, everything falls apart, not because people didn't want to. And Ukrainian sort of full potential is about 3, maybe 3.5 million, right? Again, 3.5 million, probably the top, the same as 14 for Russia. Realistically speaking, probably 3, a little bit under 3. That's what Ukraine can pull out of the economy without totally sort of making everything fall apart. At the same time, in Ukraine, there is probably extremely getting, and it's not reported at this point, unemployment is probably through the roof. It's formally not reported because most businesses are done. There's pretty much very little of the economy left at this point. So essentially, country lives off those money that Ukrainian government gets from the West, and then that money is being sort of spent in the economy, and that those businesses sort of, let's say, that cater to military needs, that's the one that sort of survive and can somehow survive. I'm not saying that they're thriving or anything like that, but and then some other basic stuff, but anything major, it's pretty much gone. So I discussed, like, for example, steel making, it's essentially done. chemical industry essentially done, machine building is actually done. So the only thing is still maybe done, maybe not, is agriculture. But as I said before, I'm extremely skeptical that, and seeing this whole situation, that Ukrainian farmers and those who hold a lot of Ukrainian land, because it's not just farmers. There's a lot of basically like industrial companies that own like 50,000 hectares, 100,000 hectares, even to 200,000 hectares. So those ones actually, they're probably the most realistic to stop, because they're not local. They just basically outside. They outside. Some of the people you will see in battalion Monaco are having, owning those kind of companies. So they're not gonna risk their money, basically, because they need to invest now in the fall in the seeds and fertilizer and so on, and fuel, and just paying for work. So seeing all of this, they probably will just sit on their money in Monaco. Local farmers are more inclined to continue planting, but also remains to be seen where it's all going to lead. So that's basically, agriculture is kind of like halfway done, let's put this way, maybe less than half, I don't know, but it's severely damaged. The only other area that's still somewhat functioning is IT, but with the mobilization of more people, that probably gonna get hurt as well, because it's very clear that Russia is not mobilizing 300,000 people. As I said before, Russia is going to mobilize much more than that, and right away. So 300 was just misleading number, let's put this way. So to balance that, Ukraine probably will need to mobilize more. And just as a reminder, Ukraine has right now about like 7, maybe 800,000 people sort of in the armed forces, let's put this way. It's between National Guard, Ukrainian army, then militarized police, so all together. That's the situation about mobilization potential by both sides. Then there's another news. So about end of September, early October, first batch of Ukrainian trainees from the 10,000 that was sent end of June are coming back to Ukraine. So that is hope for that there will be good sort of support for Ukrainian forces. From my perspective, they are not getting right type of training. Maybe it's good that they're getting training with the heavy equipment. That's definitely, but in terms of tactics, they definitely don't get correct kind of training there, because simply people who train them themselves don't have that experience and don't know how to do it, basically. So that's, but it's what this really means. At least they are properly trained from at least basics, and they know how to use equipment very well. Because there were many instances where some of the Ukrainian soldiers were not trained. Technically, they go through the training, but the training is a lip service, so they don't even know how to use javelin or those or NLAW, all those anti-tank missiles properly, and they have it, but they cannot use it, and then positions get overrun. So that was happening, and it's not just one instance, not two. There was that problem. It's not huge, but it does exist. So at least that is not going to be a big problem. Now let's actually walk through the battlefield. I'm going to start with the north, as we always do, and move in a clockwise fashion. So situation along the state border is somewhat more normalized. There is definitely shelling. There's all sort of adversarial actions, but they are not as intense as, let's say, they used to be about a week ago. So now let's jump into North Luhansk section of the front line. Let's see what's going on. So essentially, Russian front line here is collapsing in slow motion. Ukrainian troops managed to establish bridgehead on the eastern side of Oskil River, here near Dvorichna. So they maintained this bridgehead. We don't know much about this situation. And then there were quite a bit of advances here. Let's actually look in the right area. So at this point, there is no contiguous front line, Russian front line at this point here. So what happened, Ukrainian troops managed to capture Ridkodub and move like to the north of it, this Hlushchenkove. Where they are, it's unclear. They also managed, by some reports, that they also managed to capture Nove, this one, where the Russian troops retreated, but then there are reports that Russian troops counterattacked and recaptured Nove. What's the real situation on the ground? Probably nobody really knows. Everything is super sort of fluid, but the whole thing is there is no more front line. This is just kind of like maneuverable warfare where just both sides are moving, sort of like maybe I would say North Africa, like sort of probably like 1942, 1941, essentially, where there's no those times when there was no sort of contiguous front line. So this again highlights the situation that Russian command simply does not have anything to slow down this move. Let's actually look from a big picture perspective here. This was on 23rd, so yesterday. So now you can see this is the move today. So they decisively breached Russian defensive position. Russian command does not have anything to sort of stem this advance at this point. So what happened today, they actually, to slow down, at this point it's not question of like stopping, it's really about slowing down advance. So they were actually trying to use extensively aviation, and the result was extremely disastrous for the Russian side. So there was one Ka-52 attack helicopter shot there. Then there was two Su-34, which is a tactical bomber. They were shot down there. Then there was Su-30, I think it's a fighter, shot down there. And then Su-25, which is ground attack airplane, was shot down there. So again, you can see 4 airplanes, 1 helicopter with 5 units. This is, obviously Russian aviation cannot sustain these losses. And this only highlights this desperation situation when they throw whatever they can, because there is simply no infantry, no resources on the ground to stem the advance. The only question on the Ukrainian side, if the Ukrainian side have enough resources to continue decisively move in this area, because this is, at this point, this is excellent opportunity, as they say, low-hanging fruit. And as a result, Ukraine can basically take back all of this North Luhansk territory, because once Svatove reached, then there is a straight road to Starobilsk, and this whole section of the front line may collapse. We're not even talking about this Liman. At this point, Liman is probably, that's probably why Ukrainian side is not attacking it so aggressively, because this is just going to be either encircled or evacuated. The more likely it's going to be evacuated than encircled, basically. I'm pretty sure that Russian troops will evacuate in the last sort of moment. What kind of troops are there? At least from what we know, it's called, there are 2 detachments. They are not sort of formal detachment of regular Russian army. It's called bars 13 and bars 16. What they are, they actually like those people who served in Russian army, but they decided not to continue contract, and so they were doing some like civilian stuff. But with the start of this war, they were offered short-term contracts. And they signed them up, and so they fighting as a part of, they're part of Russian army, but they're not sort of formal, regular military units. So they just kind of like in some way it's kind of like ad hoc attachments, from how I understand that. So those attachments are there, but the point is Russian command does not have anything to defend at this point, this area. So collapse is literally happening as we speak here. There is a question, because obviously there is this mobilized soldiers. They could be probably thrown, and probably the way it goes kind of slow. They might be thrown somewhere here to defend this kind of like Rubizhny, Starobilsk, and Belorusk line, kind of. Probably that's sort of the next sort of stop of this collapse, if Russian command will manage to get enough of those mobilized soldiers. That's probably where sort of the next resistance line is going to be by the Russian troops. But this is kind of the latest, and that's the most important so far development on the front line in general. Now let's move to North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are sort of more or less the same as always. So Ukrainian side is trying to attack out of Spirny into the southeast without much success. Russian Wagner mercenaries trying to attack towards west to kind of basically retake initiative and kind of put Ukrainian side on the defense. So it doesn't look like it's working. There are some attacks here in Soledar that don't go, as always, anywhere at this point. Simply just not because something is wrong. It's just the Russian side does not have enough density of troops, density of artillery to make advances here. And again, here in the Dvorichna, Zaporizhya, it's kind of more, pushing towards southern flank of Bakhmut, essentially. Now let's move to central Donbass section of the front line here. So, one thing I would like to update and explain, there is also 115th Mechanized Brigade. So this is not militia brigade, because militia brigade tends to be of numbering is starting from 100, I think 102, so basically above 100. And the regular Ukrainian military brigades used to be under 100, with a few exceptions. One exception was 128th Brigade. So apparently some of these militia brigades are being converted into regular military brigades, and sort of they retain their old numbers. Apparently, I don't know all of the details, but basically we have new brigade here on this section of front line. The same goes. So 110s is the same kind as 115s. They are regular Ukrainian military troop unit. So in terms of Russian activity here, I was mostly out of this Pisky salient. Obviously, nothing is happening here. Then also was some attack in Nove, but essentially the front line here is more or less stable, and I would say static. Now let's move the west. Let's see what's going on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are totally totally static at this point, and we would say nothing is happening here. Now let's finish with Kherson bridgehead. Things here also the same, static. There is no major advances by Ukrainian side. There are some attacks, but they are not strong enough. And the focus is obviously on attacking this Russian pontoons and ferries across Dnieper River to basically drain these troops of the resources, and probably giving this whole kind of situation and inability of Ukrainian troops to properly attack. And by properly, what I mean is that first there is reconnaissance, then there is artillery support that suppresses counter battery fire, first Russian artillery, then it suppresses Russian strongholds, and then Ukrainian forces, infantry and tanks and IFV go into attack. Not the way it's done right now, where they throw without suppressing anything, without reconnaissance, and it's just insanity, honestly. So given this whole situation, that's probably the best strategy, just to drain this Russian resources, Russian forces on the bridgehead, and then when they completely weak, sort of attack them later. That's giving the situation with Ukraine, with the skills in the Ukrainian side. That's the most efficient approach and saves life. That's the most important here. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.